So this week, okay, we're going to be, today we're going to go over plant growth and development, okay, so some new stuff. You'll need to make some jot notes and things as we go along, okay. Tomorrow, we are going to start a lab that will actually go over several days. Not that we'll be in the lab all those several days, it'll just be running while we're doing other things, okay. So tomorrow, we'll start the transport in plants lab, where we are going to, it'll be kind of like the one you did in like grade 5 or grade 3 or whatever it was, where you took the celery and you put it in the food coloring water and it took up the food coloring. It'd be kind of like that, except we're going to do a little bit more with it, and it's not celery unless I can't find the plants I'm looking for, and then it will be celery. But okay, hopefully I can find some more plants like these ones. Okay, actually the ones that have the mottled leaves work better. So I'll be trying to find those, and we'll be doing a lab where we're going to not only record the appearance of our plant, okay, but also the amount of water that it takes up. Okay, over the course of probably 3 days, right? So what we'll do is we'll kind of do the pre-lab stuff tomorrow, take our initial pictures of the plant, make our initial observations, and then each day we'll kind of go in there and snap another picture of it and so on. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to set up a time-lapse thing and kind of record one of them over the course of several days, taking a picture every 5 minutes or something like that for 3 days and kind of put it all together, okay, so that you can see that kind of happen over the long term as well. Right, so we'll have that, and then we got a couple other in-class things that we'll be working on throughout this week. All right, so make sure you're planning your time accordingly. All right, so key points for today. We got to understand what factors influence the growth of plants. Okay, common sense would say, what are the things a plant needs? Sunlight, water, nutrients. Yeah, place to grow in, so some sort of substrate, okay, where it can acquire water and nutrients, okay. Carbon dioxide would be another one, okay, things like that. It can produce its own oxygen, but I mean, if it doesn't have to, that's better, okay. So yeah, definitely there's some things, some raw materials that a plant is going to require. We're also going to look at some of the chemicals that a plant produces in order to regulate its growth processes, okay, and that's hormones. Okay, hormones are kind of chemical messengers that signal the plant to do certain things. Now, hormones in plants are similar to hormones in animals. Their method of delivery is different, okay? In humans and animals, we have glands that produce hormones, and then they're transported via our circulatory system to the places they need to go. Does a plant have a circulatory system? No. Okay, so basically every cell in the plant has to be able to produce all the hormones a plant might otherwise require. So each individual cell produces the hormones, and then the effects take place right there. All right. Okay, and then thirdly, understand that plant shape is not fixed. Okay, but it is a result of the interaction of environmental factors and growth responses. Okay, that is, if I had two identical plants grown from like cuttings of the same plant, so I knew that they were genetically identical. If I grew them in different environments, they would grow up to look different. All right, case in point. Okay, and this is why I keep these plants around, because they're good demonstrations during the bio unit. These two plants here, okay, do they look like generally the same? Yeah, their leaves are the same shape, things like that. Do their stalks look the same? Really? This one's all kind of bendy, right? Like this one's got a really big, wow, I don't know if you can see it, but it actually grows downwards and then back up again, because I made it that way. But okay, they're in different environments, well, not different environments, but I've treated them differently. They are genetically identical because they all came from one single plant about 15 years ago. This plant's as old as you guys. I'm ashamed to say that because I've been growing it that whole time. But anyway, okay, so they're genetically identical, but they don't look exactly the same. Yes, they look generally the same because they're the same species and they're genetically identical. But okay, their stalks and growth pattern are different because this one I torment. Okay, I tie it to different things and I force it to grow different ways, just like they do with bamboo. You ever seen those bamboo ones that like they have the coil in them? Do you know how they do that? As it grows, they tie it to a piece of PVC pipe. They put a piece of PVC pipe next to it and they tie it to it. And as it grows, they just keep tying it to it until it grows around. Then they just take the pipe out and it looks really cool. Okay. Well, I've been doing kind of the same thing with this, okay? Just kind of forcing it to grow different ways, okay, until it had a weird shape. But they are genetically identical. the thing about plants is their final overall shape is not genetically predetermined. Their leaf shape is generally predetermined. The leaf appearance or pattern is generally predetermined, okay? But the overall shape of the plant is not. It's got the ability to adapt its shape to deal with the types of things it might encounter in its environment. Okay, everybody follow there? Okay, so we got to understand that that's going to cause some strange things to happen in plant growth sometimes. Okay, we can make a plant look really weird. All right, another example here is that that plant over there in the window, okay, the small one with the hook on its pot there, okay, this plant is also genetically identical to that one over there. All right, but this one is growing fairly evenly around. It's got this one kind of long branch, but okay, it's generally kind of evenly growing around all the way around the pot. Is that one? No. Okay, and even this one here, which is a similar species, okay, not exactly the same. It's only got growth in one direction. Right? Anybody know why? Like this one here has generally only got growth in one direction too. Anyone know why? Yeah, well actually I never turn them. Okay, they always, that one got turned by somebody else, but I didn't turn it. Okay, which way is the light coming from? Right, over there. I never turn those two plants, so they only grow towards their food source, light. Right, whereas that one, every time I water it, I turn it about, I don't know, 45 degrees or so. Every time I water it, just keep turning it so it grows evenly all the way around. See how much fun plants can be? Yeah, you're just totally, yeah. Okay, so yeah, you can alter the shape of a plant by essentially, changing its environment, and that's one of the things we need to look at today. Questions there? All right, so plants are rooted to one location for life, and that means that they have to be able to adapt to whatever they're going to encounter right there. Right? Unlike animals, who, if the situation gets dire, can just pick up and go, plants can't do that. Okay? They have to tough it out. So they have to be able to adapt to whatever the environment throws them. Now, it's kind of hard to see in this picture here, but there's all these spruce trees, and they're all fairly straight, and then there's this one in the foreground that's really hard to see, but its trunk looks like that. Why? Okay, but wouldn't it, I mean, there's nothing around to shade it. Wouldn't, if it had grown straight up, wouldn't that be like better? Because then its branches would be with the sun above. With this, some of its branches are in the shade. You're on the right track. These ones are also growing on slanted ground, but they're straight. No, this is the optimum angle. Straight up and down is the optimum angle to capture light. Because in this, growing this way, part of you shades the light from, even when it's straight above, right? Part of your leaves are shaded. Remember? Exactly. A rock slide happened or something knocked it over when it was smaller. Right? Now, it's growing in response to gravity. Right? I mean, it's going to get it could grow out this way and get enough light to survive, right? But it's smarter to grow this way for a couple of reasons. Okay? Yes, the light angle will be better, but also if it keeps growing out this way, it's going to get more and more weight away from its base of support, which means it'll eventually do what? It'll eventually fall over, right? So it's better for a plant to start doing this, which is kind of what I've been doing with this plant. Okay, I tilt it, I tie it off and make it grow sideways, and then I untie it, and then it has to grow straight upwards again so that it doesn't fall over. Okay, plants have a sense is maybe a bad word to use, but they have a sense of which way is up and down. And they know that light is generally which way? Up. Okay, so they grow in response to light first, because light's their primary resource. But gravity is also a stimulus that directs them towards upwards. Okay? Especially if we're talking about a plant that's growing out from underneath a bunch of other plants. Those plants are shading it from sunlight, and so it doesn't really know which way the light is, but it knows which way is up. Okay, and generally that'll get it towards the light. So gravity and light are two really good kind of stimuli for a plant to use in order to be successful. Right, and this is a growth pattern that's in response to it got knocked over and needs to grow straight up to balance. Okay? All right, and obviously plants have to be able to disperse their seeds. Okay, there's all sorts of different adaptations that plants have evolved over millions of years to disperse their seeds. Okay, we all know that like in late May, early June, the poplar trees do their like fuzzy thing, right? And that fuzz is everywhere and it gets in your nose. And okay, well, that's a great way to distribute pollen and seeds. Okay, to make them really, really light so that wind can carry them away. Now, why don't you just want the seeds to fall down? Right, they'll grow right underneath you and they're competition for you, right? So it's generally not good to do that. And most plants have means of making sure that their seeds are going to be dispersed to other places. Either they're lightweight so that wind can blow them away, or they're in what else? What are some other ways? Okay, pine cones, those are going to fall straight down, but they're not going to open until fire, things like that. So, I mean, there's that option. What else? Right, fruit is the best because an animal eats the fruit and then walks away and deposits the seeds in a nutrient-rich medium elsewhere. That's a very good way of saying, yeah, the other way. Yeah. So it gets rid of it and puts it somewhere else. Okay. In fact, some seeds they actually have to go through the digestive tract of certain animals to remove a coating and start the germination process. So some of them actually have to be eaten before they'll even germinate. Right? So all of these are ways to disperse the seeds. Okay, they're an adaptation to growing in different environments. Okay, so like we were saying here, okay, the big thing is that the program for development of the plant remains somewhat plastic. That means you can reshape it. Okay, so plants of the same species can vary in body form much more than do animals of the same species. All right, our final shape is genetically predetermined. Okay, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 ears, 2 eyes, okay, all that kind of stuff. It's all genetically predetermined. Growing in a different environment is not going to make me suddenly have 4 fingers, okay, on each hand instead of 5. Is that?
So if you had two plants that were identical, you were using different areas, the DNA wouldn't change at all, no matter what. Like it wouldn't adapt to change.
No, you can't change your DNA. Your DNA is your DNA. That won't change. But for a plant, the DNA's like it doesn't set a final shape. Okay, like it does for us. Right? I mean, we have to grow bones and things like that. Like our genetic structure or our final structure has to be genetically predetermined. Okay, whereas for a plant, being more plastic allows it to survive being rooted in one location. All right, any other questions on that one? Okay. All right, so a house plant on a windowsill grows towards the light. Okay, if you rotate the plant like I do with that one, okay, it'll still grow towards the light. Okay, it'll reorient its growth, start growing shoots on the other side. Okay, the growth of a shoot toward light is called positive phototropism. What does photo mean? Light. Okay, and tropism is a new term for us, but tropism means growth pattern. Okay, so light-based growth pattern is what phototropism means, growth toward light. No, sunflowers will turn, but it's not a growth thing. It's actually a water vacuole's pressure thing in order to keep it actually turns the plant. Yeah. All right, so these little sprouts here, okay, where's the light source for those? Yeah, top left, somewhere up over here, right? Okay, the light source would be up over there, okay, and so they're growing so that their photosynthetic surfaces, the flat part of their leaves, is facing the light source. Okay. If I turned it, then they would start growing more growth over here. They wouldn't turn like a sunflower. Okay, they would actually just start growing more growth over here because they can't fix the fact that these leaves face this way. They grew that way, right? So what they would do instead is, if they had little buds or something right here, okay, the new buds would start growing the other way if I moved the light source over to the right. Okay. Well, I mean, sometimes you might see that. I mean, there's still going to be growth from the end of here. But yeah, you're right. It would be directed probably more towards the light. Yeah. Okay. Plants can have some really, really weird shapes, okay, as a result of their growth. Okay, so in a forest or other natural ecosystem where plants are crowded and there's competition for light and resources, okay, especially light, phototropism will direct growing seedlings toward the sunlight that powers their photosynthesis. And that is governed by several different types of hormones that are going to be in the plant. And we're going to talk about 5 different hormones, okay, that a plant produces. Okay, so there's 5 major classes of plant hormones, each concerned with a particular environmental stimulus. Now, obviously the light source for this is over here. Okay, the plants are, the alfalfa sprouts or whatever those are all facing that way except for this loner here. Why is he growing that way? Yeah, okay. He's also using, he's not using phototropism, he's using a growth response to, instead of light, to gravity. All right, he's way at the back, and so any light that he receives, like he has to grow really, really far this way in order to get into a position where he's not shaded by these other plants. But if he grows up and backwards, he'll get into the light quicker. Okay? The reason that that plant had to do that was because it didn't get any light down here. So it used gravity to tell it which way was up, and that would eventually lead it to the light. Right? So these ones here, you can see that as we get toward the back, they get straighter, whereas the ones that are here at the front and in the middle are very bent. Okay? Because they can get to the light faster by doing that, whereas the ones at the back, okay, they couldn't see the light because they were behind everything else, so they grew upwards instead. Okay. Auxins are the first plant hormones that we're going to talk about. Okay. Auxins are essentially growth hormone for plants, PGH, plant growth hormone. Okay. Now, they're not, I mean, all hormones are steroids. Okay, that's just a general term for hormones. We just use that term. It's gotten a negative connotation because it's now usually used in the terms of the juice, right? You're taking extra hormones instead of the right amount of like steroids that are supposed to be in your body. Okay, so the term auxin is a chemical substance that promotes the elongation of a plant. Okay, elongation means to get longer. Okay, essentially to grow taller. It does not, however, affect the secondary growth that is supposed to go along with that. There's primary growth, getting taller, and there's secondary growth, getting girthier or wider to support that extra growth. Okay? Auxins primarily stimulate primary growth. How many people have seen what the dandelions look like after they spray them? Okay, okay, they get all like coily, long and coily. Okay, that's because what they're spraying them with is a synthetic auxin. Okay, that synthetic auxin was actually developed by the CIA. Yeah, they used it in that place. That's the same place, a few weeks apart. Okay, in Southeast Asia in, let's say, 1968, 69. What was going on in Southeast Asia in 68, 69? The Vietnam War. Okay? Vietnam War went very badly, okay, for the Americans. It was unpopular, and they had never fought an enemy like the Viet Cong. It was a very different war for them. One of the main problems was there's lots of places to hide in the jungle. And the Viet Cong were very good at that, and they had an intricate tunnel network and all kinds of stuff that allowed them to just pop out of nowhere and kill Americans, which, you know, Americans didn't like very much. Nobody would like that. But okay. So the Americans said, we got a problem. The problem is jungle. Forest is bad for fighting. So we need a way to kill the forest. And of course, the first answer is napalm. We'll burn it down. Well, napalm's fine right where the napalm drops. It's really, really hot. The problem is that the forest is really, really wet, and so the fire doesn't tend to spread very far, okay, because it's a tropical rainforest and it's always wet. So you don't get forest fires in the tropical rainforest like we do here. So they needed another way to get rid of the forest. So they get the CIA to make a chemical that will kill plants. Right? They called it Agent Orange. That was the code name for it. Agent Orange. Okay? Agent Orange was a chemical defoliant. You sprayed it on the trees, and the trees grew themselves to death. okay? Because it was a synthetic auxin. When it landed on the plants, it stimulated rapid, unsustainable cell growth, okay? We sometimes also call that what? Yeah, it wasn't rapid division, but it was rapid cell growth. The problem is it did cause cancer in other organisms, namely people, right? Because they figured, well, it just kills plants. We can spray it wherever we want. We can spray it on our own soldiers. We can spray it on the civilians. We can spray it on their cattle and chickens and whatever else, because it only kills plants. Well, it killed a lot more than that. Okay, it was actually really, really bad stuff, right? In the long haul. So like a lot of the soldiers would come back and they'd be complaining about their lungs were like they had lung problems and they had, it smelled really bad. And has anyone ever smelled 2,4-D? The stuff that they spray on the weeds, it has a very distinctive smell. Okay, and what ended up happening is a lot of people developed lung cancer and different types of cancers from this stuff. It's really nasty. So you have to be really careful when you handle it. I know, because I used to spray it all the time working at the golf course. This was one of the things I sprayed because it gets rid of dandelions, and dandelions are bad. All right, so auxin can be used to it can be used to do a lot of things, okay? Obviously, it promotes cell elongation, so it can be used as a herbicide if it's sprayed on in large amounts, okay? Or in small amounts, it can actually be used to trick plants into thinking that they've been pollinated. How many people like seedless fruit? This is how they make seedless fruit, okay? In very, very low concentrations, the flowers or blossoms are sprayed with this stuff. Okay, and the chemical reaction between the flower and this stuff is the same as the reaction of having pollen land on the flower and have the plant be pollinated. Okay, so little birds and bees thing about plants. Okay, pollen is got plant sperm in it. Okay, so the pollen grains that come off of a flower have plant sperm in them. When they land on another flower, okay, the pollen grain reacts with the female part of the plant. Okay, and it's called the stigma, and then it makes this tube called the pollen tube down the style, and there's an ovary at the base of the flower. Okay, so when you're looking at a flower, you're looking at the reproductive organs of a plant. Yeah, now you feel guilty the next time you look at a flower. Okay, so anyway, so the pollen will go down into the ovary, and there's an egg down in the ovary, and then fertilization will occur, and then a fruit forms around it because what's going to form inside the ovary? The seed. That's where the seed comes from. All right, so we've got, and there's different variations on that. Like if we're talking about like a peach, it's got like the pit inside. That's obvious. Okay, or inside of an apple, there's a couple of seeds. Strawberries are a little bit different because obviously their seeds end up on the outside. Raspberries, each little piece of the raspberry has a seed in it, so it's all a little bit different. But it's generally the same idea. Okay, the flower is the reproductive organ, and when it gets sprayed with this stuff, it thinks it's been pollinated. So it starts making fruit, except there's no what? There's no fertilization, so there's no seed. Okay. So, yeah, people that are like really into the whole like eating organic and everything, they generally shy away from seedless fruit because of the process used to make it. No, 2,4-D only kills, and that's what the chemical name for it is, only kills broad-leafed plants. So it doesn't kill grass unless you spray it on really heavy. Like you actually have to dilute it quite a bit. No, I mean, but again, there's not a lot of grass in the rainforest either. Everything's fairly broadleaf. It's really like any grasses you would see would be quite like broad. So and in the concentrations they sprayed it, anything dies. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the CIA. If a little bit is good, lots is better, right? So yeah. Okay. And they actually had specially equipped helicopters that would fly over and spray this stuff. And they had this specially trained group of pilots to do the job, whatever. And they painted on the side of they painted Smokey the Bear on the side of their helicopters. Except instead of only you can prevent forest fires, they wrote only you can prevent forest. Yeah. And not kills plants. Auxins are a naturally occurring chemical messenger that plants produce that tell them it's time to grow. If you spray the synthetic auxins on, it's just like taking steroids. It'll produce rapid growth, but unsustainably rapid growth in this case. Okay, And the same is true. I mean, if you take steroids, as a person, if you take steroids, there are, yes, certainly the effects that you're looking for, rapid, massive muscle growth, okay? But there are also side effects that you don't want, okay? So if you take, let's say, testosterone, right, as a man, then the glands that naturally produce testosterone stop doing that because your body detects high levels of testosterone and says, well, stop making that. We don't need any more. There's lots in here. So, and what glands are producing that? Yeah. No, your testes are the ones that produce testosterone. Okay, that's where the gland is. So if they stop producing that, they stop working and they shrink. Maybe becoming useless if that is a long-term decision that you have made, okay, in terms of taking a lot of testosterone. So that is like, it's a side effect. The glands that naturally produce whatever steroid you're taking stop working, okay? And back in the 80s, there were lots of track athletes who were taking extra testosterone, including women. And it has a different effect on women because testosterone is a male hormone. Women do produce it in small amounts, but it's a male hormone. And so it causes male changes. Yeah, okay. Not that they would grow anything they didn't already have, but they would start getting like secondary male characteristics. Okay, that would be larger muscles, deeper voice, more hair. Okay, yeah. Okay, if you ever looked at like the 1980s like East German women's swim team, okay, yeah, you never saw a more mannish looking group of people because it just does that. It produces secondary male sexual characteristics, and that's what they are. Okay, the same thing would happen if a man took female hormones. Okay, it's going to produce secondary female sexual characteristics. That's just what they do. Okay, your body is designed to receive these messages and respond accordingly. So if you take steroids, know that there are going to be some desirable effects and some very undesirable effects. The biggest undesirable effect is the fact that if you're taking lots of them, your liver has to process the toxic products of their breakdown. And usually what happens is you will start developing cirrhosis of the liver and possibly liver cancer as a result of the liver having to do way more work than it's supposed to. Oh yes, definitely. Everybody's a little bit different in terms of how much they produce. And now there's stuff out there that you can take that helps you produce more. Okay, I mean, probably a lot of it is gimmicks, but there's stuff out there that you can take that helps you produce more, especially as you're aging. Okay, you get, your hormone levels change. A lot of women, when they hit menopause, will start taking estrogen supplements because they stop producing estrogen when they hit menopause. So. Yeah.
Back, I think, kind of in the 1930s-ish era, didn't they give like female hormones to people that were homosexual because it was like illegal back then?
I have no idea. Maybe they did a lot of shady things then. What's that?
Isn't it like mess with your brain?
No, it doesn't. Like a sex hormone shouldn't mess with your brain, other than maybe some of the glands in your brain, like pituitary gland and things like that. But hormones do have different effects on the body, right? And they can affect mood and things like that. Like, I mean, you ever seen somebody with roid rage? Right? Like you take a whole bunch of testosterone and you naturally become quite aggressive. Yeah, the roid monkeys, like don't touch their dumbbell, okay? Because they'll snap you in half. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I got to watch out for things like that. Right. Okay. And certainly, yeah, hormones do affect that kind of stuff. I know when my mother was going through menopause, she would cry for no reason. Like just like I remember walking into the house one day and she was sitting in the chair just bawling. I'm like, oh no, somebody died. And I'm like, Mom, what's wrong? I don't know. I'm like, really? You're just crying for no reason? Yeah. I'm like, okay, whatever. Yeah, so it does do weird, hormones do weird things. So you do have to understand if you take more of them than you're supposed to have, weird things are going to happen, right? And that's what's going on here. Extra auxins produces weird things. Okay. All right, so yeah, like we said, the herbicide 2,4-D is an auxin, causes weeds to grow out of control, okay, and increased weed growth becomes lethal quickly. All right, so if we're looking at, let's say, natural plants. Okay, this is the wild type plant. So in here we've got lots of root growth, okay, and a bit of above ground growth, and then the flower, right? But this one here has been tagged with a synthetic auxin. How much root growth does it have? Like hardly any, right? But it's got all this above ground growth, all this foliage here. How's it supposed to support all that growth? It can't, right? It doesn't have enough roots and nutrient acquisition and things like that. That's why the plant dies. It concentrates on the other types of growth and just doesn't make it. All right, cytokinins, another group of plant hormones. Cytokinins cause cytokinesis, which is cell division. Okay, this is why plants can live so long. Okay, and I mean perennial plants can live so long. Obviously, annual plants only live 1 year and then they die. Okay, but some plants can live for thousands of years. Okay, the oldest plant in the world is the Methuselah tree. Okay, it's like 6,000 years old. Yes, yeah, and it lives in a hidden location. Its location is kept secret because there's crazy people who would go out and kill it for fun if they knew where it was. So it actually grows in somewhere in northern California. Okay, its location is kept a secret, but it is very, very old. I think it's like 5,000 or 6,000 years. It's some type of pine. It's a tree. Yeah, it's a tree. It's a really weird looking tree. Okay, it's like what do they call it? Not a wandering pine. I forget now. But yeah, it grows really strangely. Okay. Well, they've taken like on parts of it that are dead, because it's not going to be around much longer. On parts of it that are dead, they've taken cores and counted the rings. Yeah. I don't know who discovered it. No.
4,849 year old.
Google's awesome. Bristlecone pine. That's what it was. Bristlecone pine. Okay, here we go. Its location is not geotagged. Right? Because they don't want people to know where it is. But if you don't know where it is, if Northern California is a lot of area, if you want to go, like pixel by pixel and look for it. Okay? Again, it's also one tree. I mean, you ever seen what one tree looks like when it's zoomed right in? But there's lots of really big trees. It's hard to see in one pixel, right? All the pictures I've seen of it, it's kind of off by itself, but it's. All right, so what cytokinins do is they allow a plant to replace old cells. Okay, so as cells begin to age and malfunction, they die, so it needs to replace them. Okay, so cytokinins are essentially like the fountain of youth for plants. If a cell stops working, they just make new ones, okay, that are better. And they have a better ability to do this than animals do. Okay, as animals age, okay, cell division continues to take place, obviously, but there's more and more mistakes that get made as we age. Right? When these hormones were first discovered, it was like, oh, if we could make that work in people, we could really increase people's longevity, except they cause rapid cell division. Cancer, yeah, it didn't work out. Okay, it's not something that animals are capable of doing, but plants for some reason are. Okay, and it has something to do with the telomeres, the ends of the chromosomes, or something like that, and how they shorten each time an animal cell divides. Eventually, you lose all your telomeres, and that kind of fixes how long we can live for. Okay, something like that. Kevin? I mean, some things can live a long time, and some things can't. Yeah. Turtles can live they can be like 100 and something years old or something like that, right? I mean, you don't see too many things live to be more than that century mark that are animals. Right? There's just kind of a finite number of times cells can divide effectively. Usually what happens with plants is not so much that they age and die, is they start to they get to the point where disease can get into them, bugs start eating them, whatever, like it's something, and they get older and weaker. I mean, they just don't get old and weak as quickly. And again, it depends on the type of plant, right? Like poplar trees, they can live, 100 years or so, and then they're gone. And, pine trees can live several hundred years, and Yeah, bristlecone pine, several thousand. All depends. Yep. Okay, so what we see in these pictures here, guys, is just like this would be the wild type means kind of the natural leaf form of a certain plant, and then this is the tagged line that has been given a whole bunch of cytokinins, shaped quite a bit different. Okay, this one looks younger and greener though, doesn't it? It just kind of looks aged and yellow, right? But obviously there's going to be drawbacks to that kind of thing, right? And here you can see lots more leaf growth. Okay, whereas here we can see the natural aging of the plant, right? And leaves that are below start to fall off and die and things like that. Okay, so cytokinins cause cell division. Okay, so they stimulate cytokinesis or cell division. All right, then we got gibberellins. Okay, gibberellins are also a growth hormone. Okay, they can produce elongation as well, but they are also a bit more concerned with secondary growth. Okay, so roots and young leaves are the major sites of gibberellin production. Gibberellins stimulate growth in both leaves and stem, okay, but have little effect on roots. Okay. In stems, gibberellins stimulate cell elongation and cell division. So they kind of work in concert with both cytokinins and auxins. Yes, but the effect is not there. Is what I'm saying. Like, yes, roots may be producing them, but the effect is not necessarily there. Okay, it's just a growth hormone. Yeah. Okay. And when I say root growth here, I mean primary growth. They do affect secondary growth, which is girth. Okay, so they make the roots get bigger as opposed to longer, right? So gibberellins tend to be more a thing of secondary growth. Okay, and here's one of the things that can happen. Okay, here is foolish seedling disease in rice. Okay, so this is natural rice here, or like healthy rice, and this is rice that has foolish seedling disease. It's caused by a fungus that grows on their roots, and it causes an overproduction, an underproduction of gibberellins. Okay, so the plants grow really tall, but don't do what? They don't grow wider. Okay, secondary growth is the stem gets wide enough to support the primary growth. So they grow really tall and then they fall over because they can't support themselves. Foolish seedlings, they grow too fast and fall over and die. That's where the name comes from. Okay, so without the proper amount of gibberellins, then the plant will not produce enough secondary growth and it'll just fall over. Probably the effect is not as great. Yeah. I mean, we have hormones whose jobs overlap as well, right? Jake, you had a question? No. All right. Gibberellins do a few other things as well. They can produce like more fruit, increased number of blossoms, resulting in more fruit. Okay. And the size of they can delay the harvest because more secondary growth is going on. It slows the rate of growth, but it actually, if you have enough time, makes them bigger. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay, and then we have abscisic acid. Okay, abscisic acid is a plant hormone that stimulates dormancy or signals the time of dormancy. All right, so it slows down the growth of a plant and allows it to assume a more dormant state. And that can be very advantageous in areas where there may be a season of drought or winter coming on. Okay. So essentially, you can see here that what this guy has is various different types of plants going all the way back to these ones that even have yellow flowers on them, okay, that are receiving different amounts of abscisic acid. The greatest concentration being these ones up front that look dead, okay? Well, they're dormant, okay? Whereas the ones in the back could probably receive none, right? So it slows the growth of a plant, and here's how it does it, okay? Abscisic acid actually just interferes with the production of chlorophyll. Okay, so if we interfere with chlorophyll production, what's the plant going to have trouble doing? Yeah, and if it stops carrying out photosynthesis, then what's not going to get transported up the plant? And that goes down the plant. Water. Okay, this is a great way to assume a dormant state, especially with drought or winter coming, especially winter. We don't want a lot of water in the xylem of the tree or plant when winter is coming, because if it's there when it freezes, it kills the tree, right, or plant or whatever, because the water will expand and it'll break all the xylem tubes inside. It may not like rupture the tree, but it could certainly break a lot of the little tiny microscopic xylem tubes, and that would be bad for the plant. So we want to have a reduction in the amount of water that's flowing. So if you stop chlorophyll production, you slow the rate of photosynthesis, which slows the need for water, and that just stops being transported. No, you want to go dormant during a drought, right? That way you don't carry out any photosynthesis during the drought. You just kind of go dormant, and when conditions get better, the monsoons come back, okay, then you start going again. So abscisic acid can work for both cold and excessive heat. Right? Our plants are adapted to produce it as days get shorter. Different plants may produce it as days get longer. Okay? But day length is the cue for most things in our area to start doing something or stop doing something. Okay? So if you're talking about geese, for example, okay? Geese start training and practicing all their flying as the days get shorter. Right? Especially when they're about the same length, right around the fall equinox. Okay, then they start, practicing, and you can see that they've been flying south here lately. Okay, days are getting shorter. For plants, as the days get shorter, they kind of detect how much photosynthesis is going on. When that level starts to decrease, they start producing more of this to get ready for winter. Because day length is a more reliable predictor of when winter is coming than temperature. Right? Because we could get a cold snap for a couple of days, even in late August, but that doesn't mean that they should start getting ready for winter quite yet.
So, for all the hormones we're already obviously found in the plants, but for all those people that have
There's generally been found ways to either stimulate a greater production genetically, that's genetically modified organisms, okay, or to artificially spray it on. Yeah. Okay, that sort of makes sense?
It's like trees with like purple leaves then?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have like less chlorophyll then?
Different types of photosynthetic pigments. Okay, like when the chlorophyll stops getting produced, we actually see the colors of the other pigments that are also present in leaves that are kind of secondary photosynthetic pigments. Chlorophyll is not the only one. Okay, there's xanthophylls and things like that that are also in a plant's leaves that carry out other, a supportive role. We don't see them because the green is the primary one. But when the green is gone, we see the other colors. Yeah, because we're seeing the other colors. Okay, generally the wavelengths that are best for photosynthesis are red, okay, orange, things like that. Those are the wavelengths that are absorbed. The wavelengths that are reflected are blue and green, right? That's why we see those colors off the leaves.
You just mentioned GMOs. The last one you were in the fruit picker. Would those be used?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can find, and by genetic modification, I don't mean like, people are messing around with the genes of plants. What they usually do is they pollinate a plant that has, big fruit with another plant that has big fruit. And it's just selective breeding. That's mostly what genetically modified organisms are. They're just selectively bred to produce certain traits, as opposed to, ooh, I'm a scientist in a lab and I'm picking apart DNA and putting it back together. We're not there, okay? But we can certainly, even different breeds of dogs would be a genetically modified organism. I want a dog with a long body and short legs, which is ridiculous, but that's what I want. Okay, it doesn't exist in nature, but as long as I can keep finding dogs with those traits and breeding them, I'll get more dogs with those traits. That sort of makes sense? Yeah, that's the easiest and most common form of genetic modification, is just to breed plants with the traits you want, or animals with the traits you want. Okay, ethylene. Ethylene is a gas. It's not really a hormone per se, but it affects a plant like a hormone does. Right? So ethylene is a gas that's produced by certain parts of the plant, especially leaves that were near the base of the flower. Okay, and anything in or around the fruit. Okay, so it's an important hormone or gas in the ripening of fruit and the aging or senescence, okay, of plants. Ever notice that if you put bananas near any other fruit, the other fruit spoils more quickly? Yeah, really. Okay, and bananas, like, there's the banana principle. You guys heard the banana principle? If you buy bananas when they're green, you'll eat them before they're ripe. If you buy them when they're ripe, they'll be black before you eat them. It's like Murphy's Law applied to bananas, but it's true. Okay, the reason is that bananas produce lots of ethylene gas. Okay, lots and lots of it, and it's usually produced at that kind of up there, that top part there, right? That's where, it's produced kind of all along the fruit, but a big concentration of it is there. And so if it's around other fruit, it'll cause that fruit to ripen and spoil as a result more quickly. Yes. Yes, faster. Not, it's a couple of days faster. Yes, but faster. Okay. And actually, I used to do this when I used to grow a lot of tomatoes and stuff. If I had to bring them in because it was going to frost, and you can't leave them out there or they're going to be wrecked. So I'd bring them in. They're all green. I'd throw them in a paper box with a couple of apples. Okay. And the apples would produce lots of ethylene. And I'd close the box so the ethylene would be trapped in the box, and they would ripen way faster. And of course, because I'm a science guy, I would run a controlled experiment where I would put some in a box with no apples, and they would take longer than the ones in the box with the apple. And because apples produce more ethylene, they were already ripe apples, so they're producing quite a bit more ethylene, and the tomatoes would ripen faster. Well, it's not dead. It's just been harvested. Okay. There's still cells in there that are going to be alive for a while, right? There's still nutrients in there. That's what the fruit is, right? It's, other than bananas because there's no seeds in them, but. Right. Okay, but tomatoes are one, and you can see that back a while back, a few years back, there was this infomercial that was on all the time. It was for these green bags. Okay, and they always talked about how ethylene would make plants. It was scientifically based. They had these bags that had some kind of additive on the inside that absorbed ethylene. And so if you put produce in there, it would absorb the ethylene, and the produce would stay good for longer because it wouldn't spoil. So that's what they claimed anyway. I never bought them, but I don't know if they actually worked or not. Okay, but anything that could obviously trap ethylene would be a good thing. Okay, so that's what ethylene does. Ethylene ripens fruit. Okay, and if we're talking about an annual plant or even a perennial plant, when fruit is on it, has it done what it needed to do for that season? Yeah. Okay, so usually once fruit has been produced, it's either time for, if it's an annual plant like a tomato or peas or beans or something like that, then it's time for that plant to die. Okay, it's done what it needed to do. So, it's used a lot of energy to produce these fruits. So ethylene will signal the senescence of the plant. Okay, if it's a perennial plant, it'll usually start to signal other things like, usually around that time too, length of day is starting to shorten. So more abscisic acid will be produced and things like that. It would make sense. You always see the organic ones in the store that have something wrapped around the top part of it. Well, if that's where the ethylene is being produced, it would trap the ethylene in just that area, right? The ethylene wouldn't be allowed to get into the air surrounding. It would make sense. Maybe that's why they do it.
Does the ethylene produced by one plant affect the same plant?
It can affect all plants. Ethylene is the same regardless of what plant produces it. That's why an apple in a box of tomatoes will make the tomatoes ripen. Yeah. Not that I know of. Because, we only eat the ripened fruit, right? We're not talking like it's like a cloud of gas either. It's not a large amount. It's just a small amount that is produced. Yep. Yeah, you don't want to have those two around unless you're trying to ripen one or the other really quickly. Okay. All right, now we got to talk about weird growth patterns in plants. I'm going to say weird. Weird's maybe not, but I'm going to show you some weird ones. Okay, but these are things that plants use in order to adapt to their surroundings. So we were talking at the beginning, saying plants are different. Their genetic code doesn't predetermine their final shape and things like that. Okay, so tropisms are growth responses that result in curvatures of the whole plant. okay, or of whole plant organs, like usually the stem, okay, toward or away from stimuli. So a tropism will change the shape of the plant. Okay? The mechanism for that, the way a plant makes a curve, is differential rate of growth. Okay? So essentially, cells on one side grow faster than they do on the other. Okay, so what some person has done, and I don't know how they managed to keep the dirt in the pot when they did this, okay, but they somehow managed to turn this thing on its side and the dirt didn't come out. Okay, they turned this thing on its side and the plant has started to grow upwards. All right, now if it had grown outwards, would it still have gotten light? Yeah, so this is probably a growth response to what? Gravity. Okay, and the way any tropism, whether it's light or gravity or touch, is accomplished is that we make cells on this side grow faster than the cells on the other side. What hormone will make the cells grow longer, faster? Auxins, yeah. Okay, so we get more auxins on this side. So auxins are really important in tropisms. Okay, we secrete more auxins, or the cells on the other side produce more auxins, and those cells lengthen faster. Okay, so growth response to gravity is geotropism, and again, this poor lighting in these pictures didn't make them show up very well, but okay, that tree there is kind of grown like that, and I think that was the only one in that picture, but okay, starting to grow back upwards again. Okay, otherwise, most of the trees just grow straight up and down. Straight up and down is the most reliable way to get the most light. Okay, but gravity is usually the stimulus. Yes, these are the types. There's only 3 that we're going to go over. Okay, there's geotropism, response to gravity, phototropism, which we talked about already, and thigmotropism, which is a growth response to touch. Okay. No, auxins are important in all of them. Okay, the mechanism for all tropisms is to grow faster on one side than the other. The way to do that is auxins on one side, not as many on the other. Okay, and phototropism is caused by the location of light sources. Now, we can see here, kind of zoomed in, here's our light source coming in this direction here. So the cells on this side are getting lots of light, but the cells on this side are not. So we want to grow towards the light. So you can see that the cells on the back side, the side not getting the light, are longer. Okay, whereas the cells in the front are short. Well, these ones here are getting more auxins, and that's making them longer. And that will that'll create kind of a tension in the plant that forces it to curve. Okay. Now, we had this really weird plant when I worked at a golf course when I was in university. It was a spruce tree, and it grew like this. It had this big wow in the trunk. Okay, and there was also this bush that was growing right here. They obviously had kind of started growing at about the same time. Okay, but when the spruce tree was young, the bush would have grown faster, because typically like scrubby stuff like that grows more quickly than does a long-lived spruce tree. So in order to get out of the shade of this bush, the tree grew over to the side. I didn't draw the bush kind of big enough here, but okay, that smaller tree, okay, would have shaded the plant. So it grew out to the side to get into the light, and then started growing back upwards, and then back over and up. Okay, why did it grow back over and up? Because you want your weight over your center of gravity. If it kept growing out this way, it would have fallen over. Okay, so it actually had this. I'm not really exaggerating this. It had this big wow right in the trunk of the tree. Yep, it wasn't a very big tree. Like, it's not going to ever be like a very large mature tree, most likely, with that in it, because at some point, you're right, there's going to be a lot of tension that's probably going to snap it in here. Okay, but it was a smaller spruce tree. right? Maybe halfway through its life or whatever, right? So it was protected by the surrounding trees from the wind and stuff like that. So it didn't, get a lot of force on it. I would imagine that if it continues to grow like that and gets really tall, it'll probably snap. But it was, a survival tactic that worked for many years. I mean, this tree is probably older than me, which makes it really old. Okay. All right. Is that making some sense there? All right, and the last one is thigmotropism, and that is a growth response to touch. Okay, some plants, not all, will respond to touch and grow around an object, or it'll stimulate them to produce chemicals that can actually erode substances so that they can grow tendrils into the substance to support themselves. Right? So thigmotropism is typically used by plants that are creepers, okay, or they grow on other things like ivy. Okay, like ivy is the stuff that grows on trees, or not on trees, it grows on trees, grows on buildings. Okay, crawls up the side of a building. Honeysuckle does the same thing. It grows on things. Peas. Okay, if you ever grow peas in your garden, you have to make a little fence for them to crawl up. Okay, because they can't support themselves with just their stems and get tall. So you put a pea fence there, and then they put these like tendrils around, and they hold on to the pea fence and they grow upwards. Similar process, yes. Yeah. Is that your question? No. Yeah. Yes, plants can grow around something else. If they're a long-lived plant, they would be able to do that. Okay. But it's rare, right? It's usually in like the swampy kind of Everglade type trees. You don't see like trees around. You don't see too many bikes in trees around here, but something like that grows quickly, right? And in fact, these plants here are plants that use thigmotropism. In fact, I always have to make sure this one's not touching the wall because this plant used to be in my house. I'm not allowed to have it there anymore because you see on this plant, there's these little kind of brown, kind of claw-like things. If these come into contact with a porous surface, they'll start to secrete an acid that will erode that porous surface, especially drywall. And it'll grow little tendrils into the drywall to support itself. I didn't know this when I first bought this plant, but when I moved this one time, I had it sitting on top of my cupboards in my kitchen and it had been growing there for several years. And I went to pull it off when I was getting ready to move, and as I stepped back, a whole big chunk of drywall came out, about this big. And all through that drywall were these tendrils that looked like veins all through this drywall. It had grown through the drywall and it made veins on the back of the drywall to hold on. Okay, and so it kind of rotted the drywall in the process, but you couldn't see it because it was behind the plant. I never noticed it until I tried to move the plant. And this big chunk of drywall comes out like, well, that's going to have to be fixed. Okay, so yeah, you have to. Some plants can do that, and that's essentially what ivy does as well. Is it erodes into brick a little bit so that it can get a foothold, and then it'll hold on there. No, that was more that the materials were the same, and it was more secondary growth of the plant just engulfed it. Okay, so thigmotropism supported by touch, but still, to get this curvature still requires the cells on one side to grow faster than the other. Okay, you'll always see that these tendrils have a kind of a coiled shape around them. Okay, and that's because one side's growing faster than the other. It's similar, yes. Okay, like they tie it to the bamboo, that creates a stimulus to grow kind of with it, so there's no strain on the plant. And I just keep tying it to the pipe, and yeah, it'll grow around and around. So that's thigmotropism as well. Yes. Yes. No, it's just that it grows really rapidly. Yeah, like I mean, there's stories of that they would execute people by like tying them to the ground and letting bamboo grow through them. Yeah, I don't know if that's really true or not, but I've heard it. Yeah, or something like that. I don't know what happened with that, but yeah, it's not thigmotropism. It's just that bamboo grows really rapidly, which is why they can do that grow around the pipe thing in a matter of weeks. Right, it just grows quick. I have not seen that. Do they just put a form around the blossom when it's small? Yeah. So it can only, yeah, it's something around it, and then it would take that shape. Yeah. Because I mean, what's a fruit but mostly water, right? So it'll naturally take the shape of, if it's in a container, take that shape. Okay, I want you guys to answer these questions here, and then we'll go through them in a couple minutes. Okay, so why is it that two identical plants that are grown from clippings of the same plant may grow up to look entirely different? Bernardo? Right, plants' final shape is determined by its environment, not its genetic code. Okay, plants are adapted to, or can adapt to their environment. Okay, more so than animals can adapt to their environment. Okay. All right, question number 2. Any growth pattern in a plant is referred to as a what? A tropism. General term for any curvature of a plant is a tropism. Okay, we put a prefix in front of that to denote whether it's by gravity, geotropism, okay, by light, phototropism, or touch, thigmotropism. Okay, number 3. Plants in the tropical rainforest, are they going to secrete abscisic acid? No. If you go dormant in the rainforest, it's because you want to die. Okay, because you get the same amount of sunshine and the same amount of water all year round. I mean, they'll tell you that there's a rainy season and a dry season, but I mean, their dry season, it's more rain than we got the year we got the flood. So, okay, rainy versus dry, okay, it's not really a thing down there. Plus, these plants need to grow constantly or they will die. Something will overgrow them, shade them out, or whatever. They are caused by a plant hormone. They're all caused by auxins, right? We secrete auxins on one side. More auxins on one side than the other. Grows faster, makes the curve. Okay. Long exposure to 2,4-D has been shown to produce cancerous tumors in humans. Why might this happen since it's a plant hormone? Okay, it causes rapid growth, yes, but it's also synthetic. Okay, and because it's synthetic, it has other effects, and animals and plants are slightly different. So it does tend to cause cancerous tumors and overgrowth of cells, okay, within the human body, especially in lung tissue. Right, so it's definitely not something you want to have a lot of exposure to. And number 5, this hormone's involved in the ripening of fruit. Ethylene. Right. Okay, so on a test or something like that, okay, looking at this, we would obviously be looking at, a lot of diagrams, a lot of pictures. Okay, so multiple choice questions that would have pictures, or written response items that have a picture of a tree that has a weird shape, then with an explanation. Here's what happened to this tree. Explain what's going on. Right? If you just write phototropism and it's a 5-mark question, how many marks are you going to get? As long as it's phototropism. If it's not, you're going to get nothing. Okay, so should you explain how that happens? Yeah, explain. It's more auxins on one side, so that one side grows faster than the other, and this causes the plant to bend, differential growth. At least then, that's applicable to any tropism. Right, so even if you get the tropism wrong, the mechanism is the same for all of them. So explain the mechanism as well. Right, make sure your answers have a lot of detail. Biology is very detail oriented. Right, the more correct details you can put in, the better. All right, now that said, don't write so much that you contradict yourself. Okay, because I see people do that sometimes too. They'll be talking about how it's this and this and this, and then they'll be like, oh, and it's also this. No. Okay, it can't be north and south. Right, you can't make sure you don't write an answer that's so long that you come full circle. Right. Okay, you will have a quiz tomorrow. Okay, I'll post it later on today, and it'll be on plants and the stuff we've been going over the last couple of days.